Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting into the weeds of social perception. We're looking at stereotypes, but maybe not in the way people usually talk about them. This isn't about if stereotypes are good or bad, or even if you know they exist.
Right.
We're going way deeper. We want to know how and when your brain actually pulls that information out and, uses it.
Exactly. It's about the mechanics, the process inside your head.
And for you, the listener, think of this as a kind of shortcut. We want to help you understand that super fast, often invisible mental machinery that shapes, well, pretty much every first impression you have.
Yeah, understanding the process is the first step to maybe getting some control over it.
So our mission today, dissect that journey from just an idea floating around to an active mental tool. And crucially, find those spots where we can consciously step in.
And to do that properly, we need to be super clear on our terms first. It's easy to get these concepts mixed up.
Okay, lay it on us.
First up, stereotype knowledge. This is simply, are you familiar with this stereotype? Do you know it exists out there in society?
So just knowing what people say about a group, even if you think it's total nonsense.
Precisely. It's just information you've absorbed, totally different from stereotype endorsement.
Ah, okay. Endorsement sounds like belief.
That's it, exactly. Endorsement is how much you personally believe that stereotype is true, that it accurately describes the group. Knowing is passive, endorsing is active belief.
Got it. Knowledge versus belief.
And the core of our discussion today is the next step, the progression. It starts with stereotype activation.
Activation, like flipping a switch?
Sort of. It's the moment that stereotype becomes accessible, like ready to use in your mind. It's been pulled off the shelf.
And once it's activated?
Then comes stereotype application. And that's when you actually use that accessible stereotype to judge someone or interact with them based on their group membership.
Okay, so knowledge is knowing it. Activation is it becoming ready. Application is actually using it. That's the roadmap.
That's the roadmap we're diving into.
All right, let's unpack this progression. And the thing that just jumps out from all the research is the sheer speed.
Oh, it's incredibly fast.
This whole sequence, categorizing someone, activating the stereotype, applying it, it's described as rapid, automatic, and often unconscious.
That's the key takeaway. It's basically the brain's default setting for navigating the social world quickly.
A cognitive shortcut.
The ultimate cognitive shortcut, yeah. Our brains evolved for efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Not always accuracy, especially when we're, mentally overloaded or short on time.
Makes sense. So the rule is, if it's not activated, you can't use it.
Correct. An unactivated stereotype is just information sitting there, inert. But here's the crucial part. Once it is activated, application actually using it becomes the default option.
The default. So it just happens unless we stop it.
That's the mind's natural path, yeah. It runs on autopilot. Application will proceed unless the person is both motivated and able to consciously inhibit it.
Motivated and able. So it takes effort. But if it's automatic and unconscious, how do motivation and ability even get a look in? It sounds like the race is over before we know it started.
Well, that is the mental battleground, isn't it? Think of activation like opening a door in your mind.
Okay.
Application is just walking through that open door. Motivation and ability are the mental energy you need to consciously slam that door shut and say, nope, I'm going to take the longer route, find out about this individual.
And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that these shortcuts are most likely to get activated and used exactly when they're probably least accurate when we meet people we don't know well.
Absolutely. When you encounter a stranger, you basically have two paths. Path one, put in the effort, gather specific information, treat them as an individual.
The hard way.
The hard way. Path two, use the stereotype. It's quick, it's easy, it feels like you understand, even though it's based on group generalization.
So the automatic activation provides that instant starting point, that first impression.
Exactly. And only a really deliberate, motivated effort can override that initial easy assessment. It's the path of least resistance.
Okay, so how does this activation actually start? The research points to two main highways, right? Automatic and motivated.
That's right. Two distinct pathways.
Let's tackle the first one. Automatic activation. This is the involuntary one. It just happens after you categorize someone without any conscious effort.
Effortless. And sometimes it can even be triggered by cues you're not even aware of, things presented subliminally.
That's slightly disturbing. Just a flash of something and boom.
Potentially, yeah.
Wow.
The speed is the defining thing here. It happens because those mental connections, the links between the social group and the stereotype are just so well learned, so practiced.
Okay. And what makes this automatic process more likely? What are the triggers?
The research highlights 3 key factors that really facilitate this automatic activation, make it easier, faster.
Okay, number one.
Number 1 is prototypicality.
Prototypicality, meaning,
Basically, how much does the person match the typical mental image, the prototype you have for that social group, especially physical features?
so someone looks very much like the classic image of that group.
Exactly. The brain goes, ah, match found. Categorization happens super fast, super accurately based on that template, and that quick categorization immediately triggers the linked stereotype. No deep thinking involved.
Okay, makes sense. Factor number 2.
The second one is situational context. The environment, what's happening around the person, acts like a huge cue. It dictates which stereotype gets pulled up, if any.
Give me an example.
Okay, the research gives a great one. Imagine you see the exact same person.
Mm-hmm.
In one scenario, they're swimming laps at a college pool.
Oh, you dedicated athlete, maybe.
Right. Scenario 2, same person, talking loudly with friends on a street corner late at night.
Different vibe. Disruptive. Less serious.
Exactly. Same person, totally different assumptions triggered purely by the context. The situation can prime specific interpretations, sometimes even overriding clear physical cues.
Wow, okay. And the third factor?
The third is the individual perceiver's level of prejudice.
So it depends on the person doing the looking.
Yes, it's about the strength of that mental pathway. For someone who is high in prejudice, they tend to use those stereotypic beliefs more often. That repetition strengthens the connection, makes it really well learned and easy to access. So activation is facilitated, happens quicker.
And for low prejudice people?
For low prejudice individuals, that link is weaker. They haven't rehearsed or reinforced those stereotypic thoughts as much, so the automatic activation is just less likely to occur smoothly or quickly.
Okay, this next one really grabbed my attention. It seems to mess with that whole prototypicality idea. Intersectional invisibility.
Yes. This is a fascinating and really important finding. It highlights a kind of cognitive blind spot we often have.
So what is it?
It suggests that people who belong to multiple social groups at the same time, intersectional identities, often aren't seen as fitting the prototype for any of those groups perfectly.
How so?
Well, think about it. Our cultural prototypes often focus on a single identity axis. The default woman might implicitly be white. The default black person might implicitly be male. So a black woman might not quite fit the brain's quick template for woman or for black person.
Huh. Okay, so they fall between the cracks of the prototypes. What's the effect of that?
It creates this really interesting double-edged sword. Potential advantages, potential disadvantages.
Let's start with the advantage.
The advantages, because they don't neatly trigger a single prototype, those automatic stereotypes linked to either group might not get activated as easily.
So less stereotyping directed at them.
Potentially, yes. The research suggests this might be one reason why in certain situations black women might experience less of certain kinds of discrimination or stereotyping compared to black men. The mental shortcut just fails to fire cleanly.
Okay, but you said double-edged sword. What's the downside?
The downside is significant. If you're not easily seen or categorized by these default prototypes, you risk becoming, well, invisible. Psychologically, you might not be fully seen or heard. Meaning your unique experiences, your contributions, your specific needs tied to that intersectional identity might get overlooked or minimized. People using those single-axis templates just don't register you properly. So you might avoid some negative stereotypes, but at the cost of recognition and voice.
Wow. Okay. That's a really complex outcome. And this isn't just theoretical belief stuff, right? There's brain science backing up this automatic processing, fMRI studies.
Absolutely. We're talking actual brain activity here.
Yeah.
The fMRI studies looking at the amygdala, that's a key area for threat detection and quick emotional responses, are really revealing.
What do they find?
They found that when people were shown black faces for a very brief time, like milliseconds, just barely long enough to register.
Subliminal almost.
Pretty much. Amygdala activation shot up, significantly higher than when they saw white faces presented just as briefly.
Suggesting an immediate, unconscious threat alert.
That seems to be the interpretation. A very fast, maybe learned, pre-conscious alert based purely on that rapid categorization. But and this is key when the faces were shown for longer, allowing for more conscious processing.
What happened then?
The amygdala activation levels became similar for both black and white faces.
So the initial automatic spike gets regulated quickly.
Exactly. It shows that initial automatic fear or alert response is very rapidly brought under control by higher level brain functions. The conscious brain steps in.
And you see evidence of that conscious control, that effort, elsewhere in the brain scans, like the frontal lobe.
Yes, precisely. The frontal lobe is crucial for executive functions control, regulation, complex thought, and studies consistently show greater activation in the frontal lobe when people view black faces compared to white faces, especially during those longer exposures.
What does that greater activation mean?
It strongly suggests that simply processing a black face after the initial categorization requires more cognitive effort. The brain is actively working harder, likely to regulate that initial automatic response and perhaps override potential stereotype activation. It takes resources just to manage the process.
Okay, that effort part leads us perfectly into this really weird finding, the cognitive busyness paradox, part 1.
Yes, this one definitely makes you pause and think.
Because if regulating this stuff takes effort and frontal lobe resources, you'd naturally assume that if your brain is busy doing something else, if you're cognitively busy, you'd have fewer resources, right? So you'd fall back more on the easy stereotype shortcut.
That's the logical assumption, absolutely. But the research specifically on activation shows the opposite.
The opposite. Being busy stops activation.
It disrupts it, yes. Being cognitively busy, like trying to memorize a number while looking at a picture, seems to lack the necessary mental bandwidth, the working memory space, to actually complete the activation process. Remember that frontal lobe effort we just talked about?
Yeah.
If your frontal lobe is tied up with another task, it seems it can't spare the resources needed to successfully pull that stereotype forward into accessibility.
So the activation sequence gets jammed.
That's a good way to put it. The evidence backs this up. People who were cognitively busy while briefly seeing a picture of an Asian woman were later less likely to complete ambiguous word stems in a way consistent with Asian stereotypes compared to people who weren't busy.
So being distracted actually prevented the stereotype from even getting primed.
Wow.
Okay.
It's a crucial nuance. Busyness interferes with the start of the automatic process.
Okay, that covers the automatic bottom-up triggers. What about the second pathway? Motivated activation.
Right. This is top-down. It's driven by your current goals, your needs, your motivations. These internal states can actively encourage activation, or they can inhibit it.
So it depends on what you're trying to achieve mentally at that moment.
Exactly. And it gets complex because you might have multiple goals active at once, sometimes even conflicting goals, pushing and pulling against each other.
Okay, what are some key goals that influence stereotype activation?
The research points to several, but let's focus on 3 big ones. First, comprehension goals.
Comprehension.
Yeah.
Like just trying to understand stuff.
Pretty much. The basic need to form accurate impressions of people, understand why things are happening, predict what someone might do next. When this goal is strong, when you really want to be accurate, you're much less likely to activate and rely on stereotypes.
Because stereotypes are inherently inaccurate for individuals.
Precisely. They trade accuracy for speed. So if accuracy is your goal, you actively avoid the shortcut.
Makes sense. What's another goal?
Self-enhancement goals. This is the fundamental drive to see ourselves in a positive light, to feel good about ourselves.
Okay. How does that relate to stereotypes?
Well, one way, maybe not the healthiest way, to boost your own self-esteem is to, put others down. Negatively stereotyping another group can make your own group, and therefore yourself, look better by comparison.
So that motive would strongly encourage stereotype activation and use.
Absolutely. The stereotype serves a self-protective, ego-boosting function in that case.
Okay, and the third major goal?
This one's about values. Chronic egalitarian goals.
Chronic meaning. Always on.
Kind of, yeah. This refers to a persistent, deeply held desire to avoid acting prejudiced. It might stem from personal values about equality or maybe concern about how others perceive you.
So someone who truly believes in equality as a core principle.
Right. For these individuals, that egalitarian goal is pretty much always operating, consciously or subconsciously, and the result is, over time, less stereotype activation.
How does that work?
That consistent motivation, to be fair and unbiased, weakens the automatic link between the group and the stereotype. It makes the stereotype less accessible, less likely to get activated in the first place.
Interesting. So your underlying values can actually shape the automatic pathways? What about the lifespan of an activated stereotype? Does it just stay active?
No, it's surprisingly fleeting, actually. The research suggests that once activated, a stereotype tends to dissipate, to fade from active accessibility within about 12 minutes.
Only 12 minutes. That seems short.
It shows how quickly our immediate mental focus shifts. And this is a big but, just because it dissipated doesn't mean it's gone.
It can be reactivated easily.
Very easily. If you encounter the person again, or a cue related to the group, that stereotype can be pulled right back into activation almost instantly. The information is still there, readily available, just not in the immediate spotlight after those 12 minutes. Okay, so we've covered activation. Now we move to the next crucial step, application. Using the activated stereotype.
And you said earlier application is the default.
It is. Once that stereotype is active and accessible, the brain's path of least resistance is to use it. Applying it is easier than stopping it.
So stopping at inhibition requires deliberate effort.
Exactly. It requires both the motivation, the desire to stop it, and the ability, meaning the mental resources, the cognitive capacity to actually perform the inhibition. And strongly activated stereotypes are logically harder to inhibit and thus more likely to be applied.
So what helps us inhibit?
Yeah.
What boosts that motivation and ability? Seems like seeking out real information about the person would be key.
That's one of the most effective routes. Actively seeking individuating information.
Meaning stuff specific to them, not their group.
Exactly. Information about their personality, their history, their unique quirks. Things that may or may not fit the stereotype. People tend to do this when they're really motivated to be accurate.
Like when?
Often when there are external pressures. If someone explicitly tells you, be accurate in your judgment, or if you know you'll be held accountable for your decision, like in a hiring situation or performance review, that accountability pushes you off the easy stereotype path and onto the more effortful individuating path.
Okay, so accountability matters. But what about just how people are wired? Do some people just naturally rely less on these shortcuts, different cognitive styles?
Oh, absolutely. Individual differences play a big role. One key dimension is called need for cognition.
Need for cognition. Sounds like people who like thinking.
That's basically it. People high in need for cognition genuinely enjoy thinking deeply, analyzing things, figuring people out. They find effortful thought rewarding.
So they'd be less likely to stereotype.
Much less susceptible, yes. They naturally prefer digging for that individuating information because they enjoy the process of complex thought.
And the opposite.
The opposite tendency is need for closure. These are people who really like structure, clear answers, and they dislike uncertainty or ambiguity. They want to get to a conclusion quickly.
So stereotypes offer quick closure.
Precisely. A stereotype provides a fast, seemingly straightforward answer, which satisfies that need for closure immediately. So people high in need for closure are more likely to activate and apply stereotypes because it gives them that quick, unambiguous judgment they crave, even if it's flawed.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift from internal styles to external forces. Power dynamics. The research suggests power massively influences stereotype application.
Hugely. It's a very consistent finding.
So people in positions of power, how do they behave?
People who have power control over resources, outcomes for others, tend to stereotype more. There are a couple of reasons. One, they often feel a sense of entitlement to judge others. Two, and perhaps more importantly, they're often motivated, consciously or unconsciously, to maintain the existing power structure. Stereotyping subordinates can help justify those power differences.
And they can afford the shortcut because
the accuracy of their judgment about those with less power often doesn't directly impact their own outcomes much. They don't need to put in the effort to understand individuals below them in the hierarchy. It's a cognitive luxury, in a way.
Whereas for people with less power, it's the opposite.
Completely the opposite. If you have less power, there's a strong practical benefit to understanding the powerful people accurately. Think about understanding your boss, knowing their moods, preferences, triggers, helps you navigate the workplace and get the rewards you want, like promotions or good assignments.
The survival depends on accurate intel.
Basically, yes. This strong motivation for accuracy forces less powerful people to bypass stereotypes and really focus on the individuating details of those in power.
But is it always true that power leads to more stereotyping? Are there exceptions?
Yes, there's a crucial caveat. Power holders can and do inhibit stereotype use under certain conditions.
Such as?
When their own outcomes are tied to the subordinate's performance. If your bonus depends on your team member doing well, suddenly you're highly motivated to judge them accurately, not based on a stereotype.
Self-interest kicks in.
Exactly. Also, if the power holder feels genuinely responsible for the subordinate's outcomes or well-being, that sense of responsibility can also override the tendency to stereotype and promote more careful, individualized assessment.
Okay. Beyond power, what about feeling threatened? Does threat impact stereotype use?
Yes, significantly. Threats to the self, especially threats to your self-esteem, tend to increase stereotype application. It seems to function as a kind of defensive mechanism.
How so?
The research gives an example. If someone receives negative feedback, say, from a woman, that criticism can feel like a threat to their competence.
Okay.
One way to subconsciously restore their own feeling of competence is to then apply negative stereotypes to women as a group, thinking, well, women aren't that competent anyway. It deflects the personal criticism by diminishing the source group.
Oof. That's a problematic defense mechanism.
It is. But conversely, doing the opposite, affirming your own core values, can reduce stereotyping.
How does that work?
When people take a moment to think about values that are really important to them, like fairness or creativity or family, this self-affirmation process seems to buffer their self-esteem.
Making them less defensive.
Exactly. They feel more secure in themselves, so they have less need to derogate other groups to feel good. This leads them to stereotype less and have more positive, open views, even towards candidates from negatively stereotyped groups.
Right, now let's tackle the cognitive busyness paradox, part 2 again. This distinction feels really important.
It is. It's one of the trickiest but most insightful parts of this whole process.
So we established, being busy disrupts the initial activation of a stereotype. You're too distracted to even load the program, so to speak.
Correct. Busyness jams the startup sequence.
But if the stereotype has already been activated, if the program's already loaded and running, then being cognitively busy actually helps the stereotype get applied.
That's the paradox, yes. Once activation is successful, cognitive busyness facilitates application.
Why the flip? Seems totally backward.
Think about inhibition again. Stopping an activated stereotype, choosing the individuating path, takes effort. It requires cognitive resources.
Okay, the ability part of motivation and ability.
Exactly. If you're cognitively busy juggling multiple tasks, mentally drained, you simply don't have those resources available to spend on inhibition. Your brain is overloaded.
So it can't hit the stop button on the stereotype application.
Yeah, precisely. The default process application just runs unchecked because the effortful alternative, inhibition, is too demanding in that busy state. The brain defaults to the easiest path when it's tired.
So busy stops activation, but helps application if activation already happened. Critical distinction.
Absolutely critical.
And this links to basic energy levels too, right? Circadian rhythms.
It does. It follows the same logic of resource depletion. We rely more on mental shortcuts, like stereotypes, when we're mentally tired.
So morning people.
Morning people tend to stereotype more later in the day when their energy levels are lower.
And evening people.
Evening people or night owls tend to stereotype more earlier in the day before they've hit their peak alertness and have fewer cognitive resources available. Mental fatigue just makes the default path stereotype application more likely.
Okay, so if application is the default and inhibition is hard, what about just pushing the thought away?
Yeah.
Actively trying not to think the stereotype. Suppression seems like the obvious strategy.
It does seem obvious, and it's something many people try to do, especially with unwanted prejudice thoughts. But the research shows it often backfires. Badly.
Backfires how?
Through something called the rebound effect. Suppression might work while you're actively concentrating on pushing the thought down. You're vigilant.
Okay.
But the moment you stop actively suppressing, the moment you relax that mental effort, the unwanted thought often comes back even stronger than before.
Stronger. So you end up using the stereotype more than if you hadn't tried to suppress it.
That's exactly what the rebound effect is. Compared to people who never suppressed in the first place, those who suppress and then stop often show greater stereotype use afterwards.
Ooh, why? Why is trying not to think about something make you think about it more? It feels like that pink elephant problem.
That's a perfect analogy. And there are a few psychological reasons why suppression leads to rebound. First, it's just plain tiring.
Resource depletion again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suppression takes a lot of cognitive energy. When those resources run out, the suppressed thought just breaks through the weakened defenses.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, the very act of trying not to think about something requires you to constantly monitor your thoughts for that thing.
You have to keep checking if the thought is there in order to push it away.
Precisely. So you're constantly subconsciously scanning for signs of the stereotype. This internal monitoring actually keeps the stereotype highly accessible. It primes it, making it ready to leap back forcefully once suppression stops.
You're basically reminding yourself of it by trying to forget it.
Kind of, yeah. And third, some researchers suggest suppression might even create a kind of psychological need to eventually use the suppressed thought, like building up pressure that eventually needs release, manifesting as the rebound.
This sounds incredibly frustrating, especially for people who genuinely want to be egalitarian and are trying hard not to stereotype. Is rebound just inevitable if you try to suppress?
Thankfully, no, it's not inevitable. There are factors that prevent or reduce rebound.
Like what?
Well, for low prejudice people, rebound is much less likely. Why? First, as we discussed, stereotypes might not even get strongly activated for them in the first place, so there's less to suppress. Right. And second, they have that strong chronic motivation to avoid stereotyping. That underlying value system acts as a buffer against the rebound.
Okay, so intrinsic motivation helps. What else?
There's evidence that rebound can be prevented if people are given a safe, non-harmful way to kind of express the stereotype after suppression, almost like letting off the steam constructively.
Interesting.
And crucially, remember those chronic egalitarian goals. Instead of just suppressing the negative thought, actively replacing it with positive thoughts or focusing on egalitarian values can fill that mental space, preventing the negative stereotype from rebounding because something better took its place. It's about replacement, not just suppression. Okay, let's pivot to the consequences. When a stereotype is successfully applied, what happens? It immediately starts to warp perception. It directly influences how you perceive and interact with members of that group. Two major consequences pop up repeatedly in the research: biased interpretation of behavior and biased evaluation.
Okay, biased interpretation first. What does that look like?
It means ambiguous actions get interpreted in a way that fits the stereotype. The stereotype acts like a lens that colors what you see.
Can you give an example?
The classic study involved showing people a video of an ambiguous shove during a conversation. When the person doing the shoving is black, observers consistently rate the action as significantly more aggressive, more violent than when the exact same shove is performed by a white person.
Wow. Same action, different perception based purely on race.
Exactly. Another example, ambiguous facial expressions. An expression that could be confusion or maybe mild annoyance is much more likely to be interpreted as anger if it's on a black person's face compared to a white person's face. The stereotype literally tells the brain what emotion it's seeing.
That's deeply concerning. And this biased interpretation can have literally life or death consequences, right?
Yeah.
Which brings us to shooter bias.
Yes. This is one of the most stark and troubling real-world consequences of automatic stereotype application.
Explain what shooter bias is.
It's the documented tendency observed in lab simulations and analyzing real-world data for people, including police officers, but also civilians, to be quicker and more likely to shoot at black suspects compared to white suspects, even when the situation is identical and the suspect is unarmed.
And the research shows this isn't just about conscious prejudice, but about these rapid biased interpretations.
That's a huge part of it. In those simulations where people have to decide instantly whether to shoot or not shoot, the response, "he has a gun," is statistically more likely when the target is a black man, regardless of whether he actually has one.
So they're more likely to mistake a harmless object for a gun.
Yes. Participants are more likely to incorrectly identify something like a cell phone or a wallet as a weapon if they've just been briefly shown a photo of a black man, priming the stereotype, or if they see a black man holding that object in the simulation. The stereotype creates a perceptual error under pressure.
That's terrifying. Does this bias apply to other groups too?
It does. Similar biases have been found in response to individuals wearing Islamic head coverings, people wearing clothing associated with gangs, or even just when the person is shown in a setting perceived as dangerous, like a rundown neighborhood. It highlights how quickly stereotypes associated with threat can override accurate visual perception in high-stress moments.
If this is so deeply ingrained, so automatic, can anything be done? Can we train people out of this bias?
There's ongoing research, and the answer seems to be yes, but it's complex. Specific, intensive training simulations can reduce shooter bias. Practice can help override the automatic impulse.
That's hopeful.
It is, but there's a caveat. The training seems to be more effective for individuals who already have positive, real-world interactions with members of the stereotype group.
Like police officers who have positive community engagement.
Exactly. Training combined with positive real-world contact seems most effective. Training alone might struggle to overcome deeply ingrained biases if there's no positive experiential component to help individuate the group.
Okay, so that's biased interpretation of actions. What about biased evaluation? Evaluating things associated with the group.
Right. Stereotypes don't just affect how we see people's actions, but also how we judge their creations or cultural artifacts.
Right.
Music is a clear example from the research. Studies find that rap music is often rated as being more violent and offensive than, say, country music, even when objective analyses show the lyrics contain the same level of violent content.
So the judgment isn't about the actual lyrics, but about the stereotype associated with rap music, often linked to Black culture.
Precisely. The evaluation is colored by the stereotype of the genre and its associated group.
And does this biased evaluation have broader effects?
It does. Research shows that just hearing violent rap music can lead people to judge Black individuals more negatively afterward and to interpret ambiguous behavior by a Black person as more hostile.
Wow.
And chillingly, it bleeds into the justice system. Studies have found that defendants who are simply believed to be rap artists are judged more harshly in mock criminal trials, regardless of the actual evidence presented. The stereotype influences perceived guilt. Hashtag 4.2 maintenance and changing stereotypes.
Given how powerful and often wrong these stereotypes are, how do they stick around so stubbornly? How do they maintain themselves?
One of the most powerful mechanisms is the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Ah, the idea that our expectations make things come true.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. You hold a stereotype about a group. Because of that stereotype, you act differently towards a member of that group. Maybe you're colder or less engaging or more suspicious.
Yeah.
Your behavior then influences how they respond to you. They might become defensive or withdrawn or act in a way that seems to confirm your initial stereotype.
So your expectation created the very behavior you expected.
Precisely. It makes the stereotype look true because your actions help bring it about. And this operates across all sorts of groups: race, gender, weight, perceived intelligence. It's a really insidious way stereotypes perpetuate themselves.
But what about when you meet someone who just completely shatters the stereotype? Someone who is the total opposite of the expectation. Doesn't that force you to change the belief?
You'd think so, but the mind is very good at protecting its existing beliefs. The main defense mechanism here is called the subtyping model.
Subtyping, like creating a subcategory.
Exactly. When you encounter someone who strongly disconfirms the group's stereotype, the typical reaction isn't, oh, my stereotype about the whole group is wrong. Instead, the mind creates a special little box, a subtype, for that individual.
So they become the exception that proves the rule.
That's the perfect way to put it. They're mentally fenced off as not like the others, which allows you to keep your main stereotype about the overall group completely intact and unchallenged. The core belief is protected.
Okay, so if subtyping fences off the exceptions, how do stereotypes ever actually change?
Change seems to depend heavily on how the disconfirming evidence is presented. It's about the pattern. There are two scenarios. First is concentrated disconfirmation.
Meaning the evidence is all in one place.
Sort of. It means the disconfirming examples are rare, or perhaps all clustered in one person or a very small, easily identifiable group. Think of the one incredibly successful woman in a field dominated by men decades ago.
Okay, she stands out.
She stands out so much that she's easily labeled as an exception, a special case. She gets subtyped, and the general stereotype about women's abilities in that field remains untouched.
Right. So what's the alternative?
The alternative and the path to actual change is dispersed disconfirmation.
Dispersed. Spread out.
Exactly. This is when you encounter many different examples of people from the group who contradict the stereotype. And they appear in various contexts, different roles, different places.
So lots of successful women across many different companies and departments in that field.
Precisely. When the disconfirming evidence is widespread and varied, the mind can no longer easily fence it off into one exception box. The exceptions become so numerous and common that they force a revision of the main rule. The overall group stereotype itself starts to change to accommodate this dispersed evidence.
That makes a lot of sense. It suggests change requires broad exposure. This also seems linked to why someone holds a stereotype in the first place, right? The functional attitude theory?
Yes, that's a really important perspective. It suggests that people can hold the exact same stereotype for very different underlying psychological reasons or functions. And if you want to change that stereotype, you need to understand the function it's serving for that specific person.
What are some common functions?
One major one is the ego defensive function. Here, the stereotype isn't really about the other group, it's about protecting the self.
Oh,
By derogating an outgroup, putting them down, you can make yourself feel better by comparison, protect your self-esteem, or even project your own negative feelings onto them. Trying to change the stereotype with just facts won't work. You need to address the underlying ego threat.
okay. What's another function?
The social adjustment function. This
Yeah.
is about fitting in. People are social creatures. We want to be accepted by our groups,
So you hold the stereotype because your friends or family do.
pretty much. Or you at least go along with it or don't challenge it to maintain social harmony and avoid disapproval. Changing this requires shifting the group's norms, not just targeting the individual's belief in isolation. Understanding the why is key to figuring out the how of change.
This whole discussion really moves us beyond just stereotypes into how we handle difference more broadly. The sources mention a framework for this, the 5Ds of difference, reactions people have when they encounter difference.
Yes, this is a really practical model for thinking about our own responses. It lays out 5 common ways people react when faced with someone or something that feels significantly different. It ranges from avoidance to engagement.
Okay, what are the 5Ds?
First is distancing. This is basically avoidance, physically staying away, or maybe emotional or intellectual withdrawal from situations or people that feel different.
Just keys gulping away.
Yeah. Second is denial, pretending differences don't exist. We're all the same deep down. Minimizing or ignoring real cultural or experiential differences.
Okay, third.
Defensiveness. This is being overly guarded, hyper-vigilant about possibly appearing biased. It often leads to awkward, stilted interactions because you're so focused on not doing the wrong thing.
Trying too hard, baby.
Could be. Fourth is devaluing. This is actively treating the differences you perceive as deficits or as unimportant, seeing different as less than or irrelevant.
That sounds close to prejudice itself.
It can be, yes. And finally, the fifth D, the most constructive one, is discovery.
Discovery, what does that entail?
This is actively appreciating the differences, being curious, seeking to understand how those differences enrich perspectives and experiences. It's about seeing difference not as a problem or threat, but as an opportunity for learning and growth. It requires conscious effort, moving beyond the automatic reactions. Hashtag OTRO.
So wrapping this all up,
Mhm.
what's the big takeaway from this really detailed deep dive?
I think the core message is that, yes, stereotypes operate incredibly fast, often automatically as a kind of mental shortcut. That's just how the brain is wired for efficiency.
The default setting.
The default setting. But, and this is the crucial part, we're not just puppets of that default. We've identified several conscious levers we can pull.
Things like our goals, especially aiming for accuracy, making ourselves accountable, consciously affirming our own values.
Exactly. And simply being aware of these processes, knowing that things like intersectional invisibility might be creating blind spots, or understanding how cognitive busyness has that paradoxical effect, or knowing that suppression can rebound.
That awareness itself gives you power.
It gives you the power to anticipate these automatic tendencies and hopefully to interrupt them at that critical moment before application leads to biased judgment or behavior. Knowledge of the mechanism is the first step toward control.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on, drawing from those 5Ds we just discussed. Think honestly for a moment. When you encounter someone who feels profoundly different from you, different background, different beliefs, different way of being, which of those first 4 reactions, distancing, denial, defensiveness, devaluing, do you find yourself automatically leaning towards? What's your default D? And then ask yourself, what might change if, in that moment, you consciously chose to push past that default and actively pursue the 5th D, discovery? How might deliberately choosing curiosity change not just that interaction, but maybe even your brain's automatic settings over time?
That's a powerful question to sit with.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive into the psychology of how we process social information. We'll talk to you next time.